So I've had the craziest couple of weeks on Thursdays. This is the second week in a row that I spent the day preparing a sermon going one direction, and I spent 2 or 3 hours on it, and then the Lord says, no, I want you to do something else. I'm like, ah! So the good news is I got a couple of sermons in the file ready to go. The bad news is it's not a great way of spending time. Mark 15. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. Jesus replied, "It is as you say." And the chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Are you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. And the crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release you to King of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one who you call King of the Jews?" Pilate asked. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." And wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them, and he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. This is the word of the Lord. It's a powerful word. You all right? All right. Well, here we have Pilate. He's desperate. He's in an awkward situation. The religious leaders would not accept Pilate's pronouncement of innocence over Jesus. Pilate tried to give Jesus over to Herod. Herod wouldn't intervene. They blackmailed Pilate. "If you let this guy go, we're going to tell Caesar that you're endorsing another king." Pilate's wife is saying, "Don't have anything to do with this man. I suffered greatly in a dream because of him." So Pilate has one more option. You see, he had this custom of releasing a prisoner. And so, enter Barabbas. Now, you can imagine Barabbas' surprise. He's on death row. It's the morning of his execution, and he finds himself called from his jail cell. And he's made to stand next to Jesus right before Pilate. They're in front of a bloodthirsty crowd. They're gathered for the scheduled execution. You have to understand that in the ancient days, executions were kind of like a sporting event. Okay? You know, we get up and say, "Kill the other team." Well, they actually meant that. Okay? And so Barabbas is here, and he's quietly awaiting his fate. He sees some negotiating going on between the chief priests and the Roman governor. Conversation flows about this rarely used custom on the biggest holiday of the year, granting a pardon to one of the favored criminals. So you got Jesus over here. You got Barabbas on the other side. And no doubt Barabbas is eyeing the holy man. You can tell that Jesus' eyes are swollen from the numerous beatings he's had throughout the night. Jesus seems to be consumed with his thoughts as if he has pressing business on his mind. I mean, Barabbas had heard about Jesus, the miracle worker, supposedly the Christ. Some Messiah, Barabbas thinks to himself. How are you going to save our people while hanging on a cross? Now, obviously, this Jesus character had misconceptions about himself. I mean, surely God's Messiah would not be subject to the evil Roman oppressor's brutality. Barabbas is a coarse man. He scorns Jesus for his obvious weakness. And you can see Barabbas scanning the crowd, and he notices that some of the religious leaders are mingling among the common people. this would be an oddity, because these guys always kept themselves aloof from the lower classes, and they seemed to be whispering to people and handing out pieces of silver. Suddenly, a solution has been agreed upon, and Pilate arises from his chair. Apparently, Pilate is going to allow the people to choose who should die, Jesus or Barabbas. Well, Barabbas is probably thinking to himself, this is not very promising. Obviously, the holy man who heals the sick and raises the dead will be the people's choice. Pilate asks, who do you want to be released? And he can't believe his ears. They're chanting his name. Barabbas! Barabbas! You can see him when he's being released. Thanks, Jesus. I'll keep working on our common cause of getting freed from the oppression of the Romans. And with that, Barabbas is set free, and Jesus goes to the cross. Now, Barabbas, he's on death row. He's a thief. He's an insurrectionist, a revolutionary, a murderer. You might say he fought the law and the law won. Okay? He broke the Roman law, but you know what? He also broke God's law. You see, Barabbas' name actually means son of the Father, which indicates, according to scholars, that Barabbas is the child of a rabbi or a teacher of the law. He's the typical preacher's kid, okay? Rebelling against everything his dad was about. It's kind of interesting that he was called a notorious criminal by one of the gospel writers. And notorious means celebrity. Maybe he was the son of somebody famous, or he's a celebrity in his own right. The gospel writers call him an insurrectionist. Okay? That's somebody who is fighting against the present Roman Empire. However, the term insurrectionist actually means one who causes strife. So, in that typical biblical way, there's the double meaning. There's the cause that he's part of, one that is trying to fight off Rome, and yet there's that personal side of him. He's a robber. He's a rebel. He's not a good guy. I'm sure that he was guilty of breaking Commandment 5, honor your father and your mother. Commandment 6, thou shalt not murder. Commandment 9, thou shalt not steal. I'm guessing he probably committed a few of the other ones too. I don't know, sometimes don't we have a hard time relating to hardened criminals? We watch those documentaries and their lives seem so scary. They're so different from us. We're more sophisticated and refined. And yet, I'm going to argue that we might have more in common with Barabbas than we realize. I mean, we're all lawbreakers. We might not be guilty of criminal behavior, but you see, God has laws in place. And if you think about it, society's laws are not as strict as God's laws. I'll give you an example. The law says, don't do it. God says, don't even think about it. Okay? He takes it to a whole different level. And so why don't we take a pop quiz right now? Let's see how we're doing with God's law. I'm gonna ask you 10 questions because there's 10 commandments, all right? And I want you to tally them up. You can grab the pencil and paper in front of you. You can just do it in your head. Give yourself a 10 if I never do that. Give yourself a 5 if I sometimes do that. Give yourself a 0 if you do that all the time, okay? By the way, no peeking, all right? Number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. Is God your number 1 priority? Or is it a relationship? It could be your career. It could be a pleasure that you pursue. It could be something positive like your future goals. It's often our financial portfolio. What's most important to you? What rules your life? What do you live for? Compare the time you put into it and the energy and resources, and that ought to give you an idea of what you live for. All right, tally it up. Number 2, do not commit idolatry. Now, again, we live in a society that doesn't have idols that we bow down to before, in our house. But then again, our house could be an idol. We don't have idols in our cars. Well, some of you do. You got that stuff hanging from your rear view mirrors. Our car could be an idol. Idolatry is that which you turn to for security. It could be money. Again, it could be relationships. An idol is an object of excessive devotion. What gets most of your attention? Tally it up. Number 3, don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Obviously, this covers our vocabulary, but it's deeper than that. We call ourselves Christians, which means we take his name out into the world. How are you doing representing God? Are people drawn to him because of your vocabulary? So many Christians think our faith is a private matter. Number 4, keep the Sabbath, a day dedicated to the Lord. Friends, this is more than just an hour a week, Thursdays or Sundays. Okay? This is about you establishing God as the centerpiece of your life. See, I'm happy with all of you because you don't go golfing on Sunday mornings. You come to church. You could be out right now watching the NCAA championships, but you're here in church, okay? You probably have them TiVo'd, right? Number 5, honor your father and your mother. Now, this means not blaming them for your neurosis, okay? Not blaming them for the oddities of your anatomy. It means forgiving past hurts, okay? It means investing in them still. My wife gives me grief because my mom will call, and I listen while I'm watching TV, and I don't really talk much. I try to give the obligatory And my wife says, well, aren't you supposed to honor your mother? Or, aren't you supposed to, invest in the conversation? Aren't you supposed to care about her? Aren't you supposed to... Don't you hate having a spouse like that? Okay. Number 6, don't kill. Well, at least we're not guilty of that, right? But then again, Jesus said, if you're ever angry with your brother, you're guilty of the fiery hell. And by the way, if you've ever said, drop dead, or I'd like to wring his neck, Jesus says you're guilty of murder, which means you might be surrounded by serial killers here right now. Number 7, do not commit adultery. Now, this has the notion that if you even look on a woman with lust in your heart, you're guilty. Okay? It's interesting how many men who don't follow sports suddenly take an interest in Sports Illustrated. Okay? How's the fantasy life going? Okay? That's a real question. Number 8, stealing. And this isn't just breaking into somebody's house. This has to do with your expense account. This has to do with the claims you make, your tax forms, the office supplies. Friends, it has to do with how you treat the poor. Okay? If our passive behavior towards them kind of reveals that, you know what, I have the ability to care for them and I choose not to, God considers that stealing. In fact, it gets worse. In Malachi, God says, if you don't tithe to me, you're robbing me. You're stealing from God. He wants your finances so that your life is all about bringing him into society, building up his church, reaching out with his love, that your life is part of his ministry to the world. Well, number 10, don't bear false witness. I mean, that's true in court. It's also true in life. Gossip is such a killer. I mean, do you ever shade an interpretation of the story to put somebody in a bad light? Maybe leave out a piece of information? Do you talk about people or do you cover them in prayer? Of course, there's number 10, don't covet. And you know what that's like. You walk into somebody's house and, oh, I wish I had a house like this. You see somebody's spouse. Wow, how come mine isn't like that? You see somebody's car, their stuff, their career success. How come I'm stuck here when they're way over there? And do we get jealous? Do we long for something that we don't have? All right, tally it up. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. Admission into eternal life requires a score of 100%. Okay? James 2:10 says, if you complete the whole law and fail at one point, you're guilty of the whole law. And it's quite probable that some of you scored in the 20s and 30s or 40s. You might be thinking, well, I didn't score so bad, but let me ask. If your kid came home with a score for their arithmetic test, like you have right there, would you be happy? And by the way, we're not talking about a math test. We're talking about a life test. We're talking about heaven's entrance test. Maybe you and I have more in common with Barabbas than we might wish. And really, friends, Jesus went to the cross, and so he lived the life we should have lived. He died the death we should have died. And then he calls us to follow him. And it becomes a different test. It becomes, is his compassion flowing out from your life? Are you able to forgive people? Even people that abused you and hurt you and did you wrong. Are you investing in other people's problems? Are you part of the solution? Are you telling anybody about the Lord? Even talking to your own friends and family? Are you praying for folks? You know, I catch myself all the time. I'll see something and I'll start to get an attitude about that person. And the Lord says, are you going to get an attitude or are you going to pray? I'm like, oh yeah, got to pray. That's what we're called to do. Bring God into every situation. You know, Barabbas, he's special because he's the first person in history that was freed to live because Jesus went to the cross. And while the law says Barabbas deserved to die, he's guilty, there's no hope, Jesus went to the cross and set him free. And here's the focal point of the drama. It's where Pilate calls the crowd to make a decision. Barabbas or Jesus? And it's easy to get the crowd to vote for Barabbas. I mean, after all, Barabbas fought Rome, and Rome meant taxes. And you remember what Voltaire says, when it comes to money, we're all of the same religion. Okay? Barabbas was an ancient Robin Hood, a social bandit that would steal from the wealthy who supported Rome and give to those who were oppressed by Rome. This would make him extremely popular with the people. Social theft and murder were Barabbas' crimes. That's why he was notorious. He's one of the heroes of the people, someone who defied the cursed pagan Romans, the man who stood up to topple Rome. And this is what they expected from Jesus, okay? They thought the Messiah would come and overthrow Rome. That's why they laid out a palm carpet for him when he came into town. The guy that will reestablish the nation of Israel. And now Jesus failed. He's defeated by Pilate. He stands there in Roman chains. Or at least Barabbas did more to Rome than Christ even tried to do. He wasn't the Messiah that they wanted. And friends, I'm afraid that it's the same decision today. Is it Barabbas or is it Jesus? I mean, why would we choose Jesus? We've become a society that's been de-Jesus. He's kept out of schools. He's kept out of the courtroom. He's not allowed into, business affairs. He's kept kicked out of the universities. Oh my goodness. Okay? We're in such a hurry to send our kids to university where it's a thoroughly atheist education. I think as a nation, we've started to choose against Jesus. And we raise our children up this way, don't we? We say, believe in yourself. Well, actually, when you're a Christian, say, listen, your source is Jesus. You run to him when you have a problem. You're trying to figure out how to fix your relationship problems with the kids? Run to him. You're trying to figure out who to marry? Run to him. Trying to pick a career? Run to him. A college? Run to him. Jesus is the source of our lives. And you and Jesus, that's an incredible team. Okay? It really, really is. And today's popular philosophy is tolerance. Everybody has the right to do what they want. And that's a lot more appealing than choosing a God who dictates your behavior, who actually has do's and don'ts. A God who filters the words we speak and actually cares about the thoughts we think, the way we spend our money and the way we spend our time. We forget that this God, he gets portrayed as a meanie when actually he has abundant life in mind for you. He wants you to be out from sin's dominance. And sadly, too many of us prefer a Christianity and a churchianity that echoes the words of Reinhold Niebuhr. We want a God without wrath who took a people without sin into a kingdom without justice through a Christ without a cross. No hell, no judgment, no accountability, no sacrifice. Just an easy religion. And friends, that's not how it works when sin is involved. You can't out-behavior modify sin. You can't out-think sin. You can't fight off sin. It requires something bigger than ourselves. And choosing Jesus means acknowledging we're sinners, that we need God's help. We're incomplete without him. We can't make it. We need God's guidance. You know, it's funny, this guy was in my office today, and he goes, all right, every time we get the Bible study together, I say, men, let's fight off all bad thoughts so that we can focus on Jesus. And I said, you know, that's a pretty good statement, but may I suggest we can't fight off all those bad thoughts. Instead, focus on Jesus, who gives us the power to fight off all those bad thoughts. Eyes on Jesus first, and then all these other things fall into place. You know, I have a feeling when I said I'm going to give you a test that some of you said, I'm not going to take a test. It's none of the preacher's business. Mind you, I would never know how you scored. I think the person that you didn't want to see the test results was you. Okay? And don't we have this way of denying the truth about ourselves? We like to think we're okay, just as we are. But are we okay? I mean, Jesus has made us okay with God. And he's given us the Holy Spirit so that we can now pursue the abundant life he's made available. Are you pursuing it, or are you going, now let me get this straight. I'm saved no matter what? See you in heaven, God. No, that's not what he meant. You're saved no matter what, so that you get to enjoy and experience and activate the presence of God in your life right now. Whatever you're facing, whatever you're doing, whatever you're hoping for, whatever you're trying to deal with in the past, you have a God there to guide, direct, empower. He loves you. He cares about you. He wants to be involved in your life. You know, a good friend of mine said, well, you know, I think I want to end my life doing good deeds. I'd like to enter into heaven with a list of good deeds. And I pointed out to him, you know, you got a lot of bad deeds. I don't know if you have enough time to make up for that list. And he laughed. And then I said, and by the way, it's not about what we do for God. It's about what he's done for us. And it's about him going to the cross. You're not saved because, you know, you earned it. None of us earn it. We're only saved because of his mercy and grace. And friends, Jesus died for you. He died in your place. And you know, it's kind of interesting. The words describing Barabbas as a robber, an insurrectionist, they were also used for the two thieves who were crucified with Jesus that day. All three were guilty of the same crime. crimes, sentenced to die the same way on the same day. You see, Barabbas had a cross that was already prepared for him. His execution is scheduled to be with the other two thieves. So what happened? Jesus steps in Barabbas' place on the day he was supposed to die, bearing the cross he was supposed to bear, dying the death that he was supposed to die. Barabbas, think about this. He was set free for crimes that he never asked to be forgiven for. Okay? Jesus stepped in for him. He didn't even know what was going on. And you need to know something. Once Barabbas is set free, he can never be accused of those crimes again. He can never be tried for them, sentenced for them. The debt was paid, the penalty completed. Okay? It's all requirements are fulfilled. Friends, I'm telling you this because that's what Jesus did for you. Your sins are covered because of what he did for you on the cross. It's hard to understand, but it's in Romans 5:8. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for you. The sins you used to commit, the sins you are committing, and the sins you're going to commit. Okay? And so here's what the deal is. And I want you to hear me. Jesus has paid your penalty. And you and me, we're just like Barabbas. Okay? We're clueless of what he did for us. But he did it for us. And then he stepped in and said, now I want you to follow me. I have a new agenda for your life, a new identity for you, a new calling. And that's right now where you and I have to make a decision. Are we going to rest in being forgiven? Or are we going to step forward into the life that he's made available to us? I want to say it again. Are you stepping into that place where you love and you care for people and you pray for them and you resource for them? Is your life all about giving? Barabbas was all about me getting out from the tyranny of Rome. Jesus is all about you being freed from the tyranny of sin. Let's pray. Gracious God, it's kind of a heavy night to think about Barabbas. He's that guy that nobody likes. He didn't deserve it. And then you point out we don't deserve it. It's a mercy freely given. Apologize for taking it for granted. Apologize for living off a cheap grace.